Fellow Africans, esteemed leaders, and citizens of our great continent, we gather today in a moment of profound reflection, bound by a shared vision for justice, accountability, and the advancement of our people. The events unfolding in Kenya, a nation long regarded as a beacon of stability and progress in East Africa, have stirred the conscience of many across our continent. They compel us to address a matter of grave concern, one that resonates beyond borders and speaks to the very heart of our collective values as Africans. Today, I stand before you to call upon the African Union to launch an immediate and thorough investigation into the actions of President William Ruto and his administration in response to the protests that have swept across Kenya, protests that reflect the legitimate grievances of a people yearning for fairness, opportunity, and dignity. Let me begin by acknowledging the resilience and spirit of the Kenyan people. For decades, Kenya has stood as a symbol of democratic aspiration, a nation that has navigated the complexities of its diverse ethnic tapestry and emerged as a hub of economic and cultural dynamism. Yet today we see a nation in turmoil, its streets filled with the voices of the youth, the disenfranchised, and the disillusioned, all demanding change. These protests, which began in June 2024 as a response to proposed tax hikes, have evolved into a broader movement against systemic issues: corruption, economic stagnation, and police brutality. The cries of "Ruto must go" and "Wantam" echo not only in Nairobi, but in the hearts of those who believe in the promise of a just Africa. The scale of these protests is unprecedented. Over the past year, more than 100 lives have been lost, countless others injured, and hundreds arrested, often arbitrarily. The Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights has documented these tragedies, reporting 31 deaths in a single day of protests on July 7, 2025, alone. Among the fallen was a 12-year-old girl in Kiambu, struck by a stray bullet while in the safety of her home. Another, Boniface Kariuki, a 22-year-old mask vendor, was shot at point-blank range during a rally against police brutality. The death of blogger Albert Ojwang in police custody last month further ignited public outrage, with an autopsy revealing head trauma and bruises, contradicting official claims of suicide. These are not mere statistics, they are stories of lives cut short, of families shattered, and of a nation's trust betrayed. It is in this context that I, as a leader committed to the principles of Pan-Africanism and the empowerment of our people, call upon the African Union to act. The AU, as the guardian of our continent's democratic ideals and human rights, has a moral and institutional obligation to investigate the actions of President Ruto's administration. The allegations of excessive force, extrajudicial killings and abductions demand scrutiny. The directive from President Ruto himself, ordering police to shoot protesters in the legs and break their legs to prevent property damage, is not only a violation of human rights, but a dangerous escalation that threatens the democratic fabric of Kenya and sets a perilous precedent for our continent. Let us be clear. The right to protest is enshrined in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, a document that binds us all. Article 11 guarantees the right to assemble freely, and Article 4 protects the right to life. When a government responds to peaceful demonstrations with live ammunition, tear gas, and water cannons, it violates these sacred principles. When a president publicly instructs security forces to maim citizens rather than engage in dialogue, it undermines the very essence of leadership. Such actions cannot be dismissed as internal matters. They are a stain on our collective conscience and a challenge to the values we uphold as Africans. The African Union must investigate not only the use of force, but also the broader context of these protests. The Kenyan people are not protesting merely for the sake of unrest. They are driven by deep-seated frustrations, a cost of living crisis that has eroded wages, youth unemployment that stifles potential, and a government perceived as tone-deaf to the needs of its citizens. President Ruto campaigned in 2022 as a champion of the hustler nation and promising to uplift the poor and fight corruption. Yet, his administration's policies, aggressive tax hikes, ballooning debt, and a perceived tolerance for corruption have fueled disillusionment. The now withdrawn finance bill of 2024, which proposed taxes on essentials like bread and mobile money transfers, was seen as a betrayal of those campaign promises. The termination of a $2 billion zero-cents deal with the Adani Group to control Kenya's main airport, only after public outcry, further exposed a government seen as prioritizing elite interests over the public good. Moreover, the allegations of state-sponsored violence cannot be ignored. Opposition leaders, including former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, have accused the government of deploying unmarked vehicles and armed gangs to opposition strongholds, a tactic reminiscent of authoritarian regimes. Civil society groups have reported abductions of activists, medical workers, and influencers, with some subjected to torture and interrogation. These are not the actions of a government confident in its mandate, but of one desperate to cling to power through fear and intimidation. The African Union, as a body committed to promoting peace, security, and good governance, must not turn a blind eye. The AU's Peace and Security Council has the authority to address situations that threaten stability in member states. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights can investigate allegations of human rights violations. I call for a joint mission comprising independent experts and representatives from across the continent to conduct a transparent investigation into the following: the use of lethal force by Kenyan security forces, the circumstances surrounding abductions and extrajudicial killings, and the government's response to legitimate public grievances. This investigation must be swift, impartial, and conclusive, with findings made public to ensure accountability. Let me address a potential counter-argument that such an investigation constitutes interference in Kenya's sovereignty. To this, I say that sovereignty is not a shield for impunity. The African Union was founded on the principle of collective responsibility, where the welfare of one nation's people is the concern of all. When a government's actions risk destabilizing a nation and undermining the democratic aspirations of its youth, it is the duty of the AU to intervene. Not to dictate, but to uphold the standards we have set for ourselves. Kenya's stability is critical not only for its 57 million citizens, but for the entire East African region, a hub of economic and diplomatic influence. I also call upon the AU to engage in proactive dialogue with the Kenyan government, opposition leaders, and civil society. The protests in Kenya are leaderless, youth-driven, and fueled by social media, reflecting a new era of activism that bypasses traditional political structures. This generation, born after the restoration of multi-party democracy in 1992, is educated, connected, and uncompromising. They demand systemic change, not temporary concessions. The AU must facilitate a platform for inclusive dialogue, ensuring that the voices of Kenya's youth are heard and that the government responds with meaningful reforms, not repression. To my fellow African leaders, I urge you to reflect on the broader implications of this crisis. Kenya is not an isolated case. Across our continent, young people are rising, demanding accountability, economic opportunity, and an end to corruption. From Burkina Faso to Nigeria, from South Africa to Sudan, the youth are the heartbeat of our future. If we fail to listen, if we respond with force rather than understanding, we risk alienating the very generation that will shape Africa's destiny. The protests in Kenya are a warning, a call to recommit to the principles of justice, equity, and good governance. Let me share a personal perspective rooted in my own journey as a leader. In Burkina Faso, we have faced our own challenges, security threats, economic hardship, and the weight of historical injustices. But I have learned that leadership is not about silencing dissent. It is about engaging with it. When our people took to the streets, we responded with dialogue, with policies aimed at empowering women and youth, and with a commitment to transparency. The contrast with Kenya's current trajectory is stark. While we in Burkina Faso strive to rebuild trust through inclusion, Kenya's government has chosen a path of confrontation, alienating its people and risking further instability. I do not stand here to cast judgment, but to appeal to our shared humanity. President Ruto, I address you directly. Your people are not your enemies. They are the soul of Kenya, the dreamers and builders of its future. Listen to them, engage with them, abandon the rhetoric of violence, and embrace the path of reconciliation. The world is watching, and history will judge us not by the power we wield, but by the legacy we leave. To the Kenyan people, I say this: your courage inspires us all. Your determination to demand accountability, to reject corruption, and to fight for a better future is a beacon for Africa. Do not lose hope, for your struggle is our struggle. The African Union, I am confident, will stand with you, ensuring that justice is served and that your voices are amplified. Let us delve deeper into the implications of this crisis for the African continent. The protests in Kenya are not merely a national issue. They reflect a broader trend of youth-led movements across Africa. Our continent is the youngest in the world, with over 60% of our population under the age of 25. This demographic reality is both our greatest asset and our greatest challenge. Our youth are tech-savvy, globally connected, and acutely aware of the injustices that plague their societies. They see the wealth of our natural resources, the potential of our economies, and the promise of our democracies. Yet they are confronted daily with unemployment, inequality, and systemic corruption. In Kenya, the unemployment rate among youth stands at over 35%, with many graduates unable to find meaningful work. This is not unique to Kenya. It is a challenge we face from Accra to Addis Ababa, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. The African Union must recognize this demographic shift as a call to action. We cannot afford to ignore the aspirations of our youth, nor can we suppress their voices with force. The protests in Kenya are a microcosm of a larger struggle, a demand for governments to prioritize inclusive growth, to invest in education and skills training, and to create pathways for young people to contribute to their societies. The AU's Agenda 2063, with its vision of an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law, must not remain a mere aspiration. It must be a blueprint for action, starting with addressing crises like the one in Kenya. I propose that the African Union establish a permanent mechanism for engaging with youth movements across the continent. This could take the form of a Youth Advisory Council, composed of representatives from member states, tasked with advising the AU on policies that affect young people. Such a council would ensure that the voices of the youth are not only heard, but integrated into the decision-making processes of our continental body. In the context of Kenya, this council could mediate between the government and protesters, fostering dialogue and preventing further escalation. Furthermore, the AU must strengthen its capacity to monitor and respond to human rights violations in real time. The current crisis in Kenya highlights the need for a rapid response mechanism within the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. This mechanism could deploy fact-finding missions at the first sign of unrest, gathering evidence and engaging with all stakeholders to de-escalate tensions. Such a proactive approach would not only prevent loss of life, but also signal to our people that the AU is a responsive and relevant institution. I also call for economic solidarity among African nations to support Kenya during this crisis. The economic pressures fueling the protests, high debt, inflation, and unemployment are not unique to Kenya. Many of our nations face similar challenges, exacerbated by global economic headwinds and the legacy of colonial exploitation. The AU, in collaboration with regional economic communities like the East African Community, should explore mechanisms to provide targeted support to Kenya, such as debt relief initiatives or technical assistance for economic reforms. This would demonstrate that Africa stands together, not only in times of prosperity, but also in moments of adversity. To the international community, I extend a message of partnership. The situation in Kenya has drawn global attention, with organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch documenting the abuses. While we welcome their scrutiny, we assert that Africa must take the lead in resolving its own challenges. The African Union, with its deep understanding of our cultural and historical context, is best positioned to mediate this crisis. We invite our international partners to support the AU's efforts, whether through technical expertise, funding for investigations, or amplifying the voices of Kenya's youth on the global stage. In closing, I reiterate my call for the African Union to launch an immediate investigation into the actions of President William Ruto's administration. Let this investigation be a step toward healing, accountability, and the restoration of trust in Kenya. Let it serve as a reminder that no leader is above the people and no government can thrive without the consent of the governed. Let it inspire us to build an Africa where the rights of every citizen are protected, where dissent is met with dialogue, and where the dreams of our youth are nurtured, not crushed. The time for action is now. Let us act with courage, unity, and purpose. Beyond investigation, the AU must facilitate inclusive dialogue between the Kenyan government, opposition, and civil society, particularly the youth leading these leaderless, social media-driven protests. This generation, born after Kenya's 1992 democratic restoration, is educated, connected, and uncompromising in its demand for systemic change. The AU should establish a platform to amplify their voices and push for reforms, not repression. A proposed youth advisory council within the AU could ensure that young people's perspectives shape our policies, preventing future crises. My own experience in Burkina Faso informs this call. Facing security threats and economic challenges, we chose dialogue over confrontation, implementing policies to empower women and youth. This contrasts with Kenya's current path, where state violence has alienated citizens and risked further instability. I urge President Ruto to listen to his people, abandon violent rhetoric, and embrace reconciliation. Leadership is not about silencing dissent, but engaging with it to build a stronger nation. The Kenyan crisis has broader implications for Africa. From Burkina Faso to Nigeria, youth are rising against corruption and inequality. The AU's Agenda 2063 envisions an Africa of good governance and justice, but this vision requires action, a permanent mechanism to monitor human rights violations in real time, coupled with economic solidarity like debt relief or technical support for Kenya, could address the root causes of unrest. The AU must also strengthen ties with regional bodies like the East African Community to foster stability. To the international community, I extend a call for partnership. While global organizations have documented Kenya's abuses, Africa must lead in resolving its challenges. The AU's cultural and historical insight positions it uniquely to mediate. International partners can support through expertise, funding, or amplifying Kenyan voices globally, but the AU must take the helm. To the Kenyan people, your courage is a beacon for Africa. Your fight against corruption and for a better future inspires us all. Do not lose hope. Your struggle is ours, and the AU will stand with you. To my fellow leaders, let us heed this warning. Our youth are our future, and suppressing them risks our continent's destiny. We must recommit to justice, equity, and governance that serves all. In conclusion, I call for an AU-led investigation into President Ruto's actions, a step toward healing and accountability. Let it remind us that no leader is above the people and no government thrives without their consent. Let us build an Africa where rights are protected, dissent is met with dialogue, and youth are empowered. The time for action is now. Let us act with courage, unity, and purpose. May Africa rise. Thank you, and may Africa rise.